your views about Indian atrocities in Indian-occupied Kashmir?
The world community has to know that there are around 10 million people living in Kashmir and that this became the biggest prison on earth where the so-called crime of every Kashmiri is living in an occupied Kashmiri region. With the International Alliance for Rights and Freedoms and in my position as a president of Postversa, we have witnessed in the last year the mass detention of politicians, activists, with more than 6,605 people taken into preventive custody. 444 were booked under the Jammu and Kashmir Public Safety Act PSA of 1978. And those arrested included former chief ministers Farooq Abdullah, Omar Abdullah, and Mehbooba Mufti, and at least 144 minors, but still 400 people remain in preventive custody. Despite initial denials regarding the detention of children, the Central and Jammu and Kashmir administrations finally admitted that 144 children had been detained in August-September 2019, of whom the youngest was only 9 years old. How could a 9-year-old child pose a threat? In an offer to move indigenous Kashmiri Muslims, Modi government has quite recently allowed Jammu and Kashmir residence declarations to more than 25,000 Indians to come colonize the Kashmiri Valley. This Indian colonization has started where they use now similar models to take land and property of the Palestinian people, where they, for example, take revenge on activist families by punishing them all or demolishing their house for an act of an individual member of that family.
What is the role of United Nations in resolving Indian-occupied Kashmir issue?
Good question. The United Nations has made already more than 10 resolutions on Kashmir. They have even made the decision to request a referendum and ask India to pull back its powers. In a communication on November 2, 1947, the former Indian head administrator Jawaharlal Nehru declared that the destiny of the Kashmiris would eventually be chosen by the individuals living in Kashmir themselves, when lawfulness was set up through a binding referendum held under global protection like the United Nations. Now I have some questions regarding the United Nations now. It is needed that the United Nations becomes a big player again for world peace and they can work for a global solution.
Why has United Nations failed to implement its United Nations Security Council resolutions on Kashmir?
Also a good question, yes. Ladies and kids involved Kashmir face now horrendous conditions as they are tormented, attacked and murdered by the involved powers. Indian powers direct gigantic inquiries and cordon activities where the whole population is held under the lockdown in their homes for a few days. During house-to-house search, severe Indian army powers disregard ladies and torment youngsters in the event that such abominations have occurred elsewhere on the planet. There would be a firestorm in worldwide media. Be that it is May on Kashmir, but the bosses of the United Nations have decided to choose to forget the people of Kashmir and a big wall of silence. Therefore, we will try with the International Alliance for Rights and Freedoms to bring this and now, for the first time in years, on the agenda of the European Human Rights Councils. So there is hope again for the Kashmiris. They should never lose hope. And I'm hopeful today with the attempts of China to mobilize the UN Security Council, and this is also against the August's changes from last year in India. There is a trilateralization of the disputes over Kashmir between India, Pakistan and China, landing a good and very positive China-Pakistan partnership specifically for the man-made problems made by the Indian government in Jammu and Kashmir. This is, in my opinion, the only positive evolution that China chooses to support the human rights of the people of Kashmir, victims of Modi's devil policy.
Thank you so much.